Yeah, so like lab leak is another one where it's like, well, how do you know it's lab leak? How do I know it's lab leak? Because Fauci lied and Hunter Biden
Right.
laptop, and it's
Right.
like, okay, come on, you haven't engaged with it at all. There's really interesting research that shows there's a really strong study that shows that there's like a high degree of certainty that it came from the wet markets.
In this video, Destiny sits down with Lex Fridman on the Lex Fridman podcast. In the clip, Destiny makes some wild assumptions about Joe Rogan's audience. When Lex Fridman challenges Destiny on his claims, all he can come up with are anecdotes with no real evidence. With that, let's watch Lex Fridman crush Destiny's stupid argument with one simple question.
I think there are good conversations to be had about a lot of stuff related to how we handled the coronavirus. You know, were lockdowns effective? Was there enough data to support the huge measures we took? You know, why didn't we have the option to show I was infected a month ago? Why do I need to be vaccinated? Why wasn't that option ever a thing in the United States? I don't think it was. There are really good questions to be asked there, but all the people asking the questions are also trying to tell you that ivermectin and monoclonal antibodies are the way to go for everything, and the vaccine is evil, and they're just going to turn you gay like the frogs.
Yeah,
and it's like Jesus, like you can't. There's like no place to reasonably criticize from, because all of the people that are criticizing aren't doing it with an open mind, or you know, they're not reading studies or doing anything. They're saying like, I do my own research, which means they listen to whatever the last guy on Joe Rogan said, and now they're parroting that opinion 100%.
Easy now.
Yeah.
Easy now, bro.
The last guy on Joe Rogan, not Joe Rogan. Okay, that Robert Malone guy on Joe Rogan got me real fired
That's
up.
one guest.
People see him as like the father of mRNA technology. He published one paper. Okay.
What do you mean people? Which people think that?
Joe Rogan fans. I get like I run into these people. I start arguing with people, and they start setting me. But what about?
I'm a Joe Rogan fan, and I appreciate the vaccine.
That's good. I'm glad you do. But there's definitely
But you said there's a type. There's a type. What's the type? What's the type of Joe Rogan fan?
Anti-establishment.
I think that's not Joe Rogan. That's a general public discourse. There's a default anti-establishment on the right and the left. That's the default easy thing to go to.
I think Joe Rogan fans are definitely a certain type of anti-establishment, though. Like I could guess the Joe Rogan fan. Like if I were to do general population versus Joe Rogan fan, who do you think is more likely to be anti-vaccine?
Do you have data on this? Or are you just guessing?
Yeah, just guessing.
Yeah, I think you are actually judging.
I am.
I think you're judging, because I think you're also. The beautiful thing about podcasting, this could be similar to streaming, is there's a large number of people that just listen. Like, what does it mean to be a Joe Rogan fan?
I don't think you just listen. I think people listen and absorb the information.
I would say that the Joe Rogan fan base is as divided in the vaccine as the general public.
Gotcha. Man, I'm going to look for polling data on that. I'm sure somebody's got to have done it out there, but
no. But you're basically revealing the fact they have no data. You're using your own judgment
for sure, based on how he's had conversations about how his experience with the coronavirus, and then based on the guests that have come on that have talked and echoed a lot of like anti-vax talking points and been completely unchallenged, and then based on statements he's made about like myocarditis and the vaccine and everything as well. Yeah.
So it's the level of challenge or not that he's doing.
Well, yeah, and then what his true positions are, and then the types of guests he typically chooses to bring on to talk about the vaccines. Yeah.
Okay, but that represents somehow a deep anti-establishment feeling versus just a vaccine. I mean, I've seen the vaccine and other things being a thing that broke people.
They seem to. The coronavirus, that whole 1 or 2 years broke a lot of people.
There's a lot of emotion, and the emotion quickly solidified into an opinion that.
I've never seen so much projection in my life. Everything he says about other people is exactly how he behaves. In his eyes, anybody that doesn't agree with him, that says, I did my own research, they just listen to Joe Rogan. And he assumes no one wanted to have an honest conversation because they disagree with him. They couldn't have possibly done their own research, meaning they read studies, they listened to various experts and came to their own conclusion. In his eyes, he's the only one who does that. It's so stupid. How could you ever have an honest conversation with him if he assumes that if you asked questions about COVID, then all you did was listen to Joe Rogan? Or if you thought ivermectin was an effective treatment, you just listened to Joe Rogan. Doctors were prescribing that to their patients. To this day, I don't know how effective ivermectin is against COVID, but I do know doctors were prescribing it to their patients. Don't their opinions matter? Obviously not during that time, because they were shut down. It didn't matter what your qualifications were as a doctor. Your ideas were shut down and you were told to shut up. I'll give you a personal example. I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but during that time I'd get labeled as one just because I felt I was healthy enough to not need it based on what I'd read. Maybe there were a lot of people like me that just felt like they didn't need to put an untested drug into their body. Couldn't it just be as simple as that, Destiny? And by the way, I thought this, and I still believe this, it's only a specific portion of the population for which the vaccine can be beneficial. Older folks and sick folks with multiple comorbidities. Bottom line, he thinks he's the smartest person in the room all the time. Anyone who disagrees with him must not have done any research. And even if they did, they couldn't possibly have done as much research as he did. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
Almost had nothing to do with like thinking through and updating your knowledge and so on. You just made up your mind.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it comes from that anti-establishment place. Like the vaccine represents the ultimate of establishment. It was a huge private company backed by a huge public government, and there's Fauci, and there's Biden, and there's Pfizer, and there's all these countries locking us up in our homes, telling us to do a thing. Like the vaccine was like the ultimate like submission tool to like show you that the government owns you. Not only do you have to get injected once, it's a series, and then you got to get boosters, and it's like they're trying to keep you under their thumb, and that's the control. I feel like that vaccine became like the ultimate rallying cry between like, do you support, are you a sellout that is going to believe whatever the government tells the sheep to take, or are you going to be like the guy that stands against the crowd and gets fired from his job and pulls his kids from school because they're not going to let the evil Fauci medicine, jab them in the arm?
And the funny thing is, the crowd that stands against the institution is not larger than the crowd of sheep. There's like one sheep standing there.
Sure, yeah, or it feels that way sometimes.
One vaccinated sheep. Well, okay. What's the defense of institutions? How do you regain the trust of institutions? Like, first of all, do you think that there's ways in which WHO, CDC failed? And do you think there's criticism towards Pfizer and the big pharma companies that's deserved?
Damn, the pharma companies, I'm not sure. For CDC and WHO, so here's a criticism that I have of all of academia, and I feel it's stronger and stronger every day. I don't think it's enough to be a researcher or to be correct about issues. Academia needs to increase its ability to communicate. It is just an unbelievable, unmitigated failure that academics are unwilling to wade into the complicated topics that exist today because other people are,
First you call me spineless, and then you call me a bad communicator.
But no, look, you're here, you're doing it, so you get props from me, okay? Good job.
That motherfucker.
But there are like so many, but I'm sure that you must have heard another fellow academic, a fellow colleague, express some amount of frustration about, like, in their specific discipline, they know something to be true, and they know that, like, a lot of the messaging is, like, wrong or bad in the public about it, but they're never going to step out and say anything because either one, they're very measured and careful with their take, which they feel is incompatible with what people want to hear, or two, they're really worried that they might be incorrect, so they're going to be cautious while everybody else is going out and like hardcore.
And they also don't have the support of institutions for them to go out on a limb.
Yeah, that too.
So like to take risks. For example, I've heard that with lab leak theory. I've had a lot of virologist friends that are like, yeah, it's obviously leaked from a lab. Okay. Like early on.
Oh, maybe. Okay. We can fight over this one, but sorry, go ahead. No, keep talking.
We can fight over this. But like I should sort of backstep and say, like, that's like you talk about shooting the shit. You haven't really investigated, but it's your gut. Mm-hmm. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. They would never say that publicly.
Of course.
Mostly because you're saying, like,
if you like watching videos like this one, like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Let's get back to the video.
Like, what they would all say is like, we want to see data.
Yeah, which would be good, which is fine.
So they're going with like this is too many coincidences in the same place. That's the logic. But they don't want to say anything because there's no data. You need to have evidence. You need to have actual evidence to say one way or the other. There's that. But there's also, just like you said, I mean, effective communication. You're a fan of Sean Carroll.
Yes. He's like one of the only people in this whole planet that I like besides you. I love Sean Carroll.
Anytime Sean Carroll is brought up as evidenced, there's a smile that comes over your face.
I love it.
Of like joy. Yeah. Of like a little kid thinking about Santa Claus. Okay, I love Sean Carroll too. People should listen to this podcast.
I love Sean Carroll because I hate this divide between like you're either STEM or you're like philosophy, arts, and all that other stuff, and the two worlds can never cross. And I love that he was so good at physics, but like explores and pays attention to all of the like sociological stuff too. It's so rare to find that quality in a person.
He's legit one of the really, really, really special minds. But you don't have to be a Sean Carroll. You can be just a little better at educating. Another person in the medical and the health space is somebody named Andrew Huberman, a friend of mine from Stanford. He's an incredible educator. Mm-hmm. There's the kind of process in science they usually call like review or survey papers, where you basically summarize all that's going on, integrate it, and like draw wisdom from it, and also project like where's the discipline headed. And Andrew does that basically on all these subcomponents of the different stuff going on in neuroscience and biology, neurobiology, all of that. He's able to. He does a podcast called Huberman Lab where he just summarizes all and is able to explain like what does that actually mean for your life in terms of protocols of how to make your life better. I feel like people should be able to do that more and more. But with virology and oh boy, that's a tricky one. That's a really tricky one.
I wish that people could have honest conversations. Like, I attack a lot of people that do the lab leak theory stuff, but truly, we should be able to have that conversation publicly. It always feels like the people that are having the conversation don't ever really want to have the conversation. They're not being honest. Like, I'm a guy that like does his own research, and it's so boring reading studies, and a lot of it I can only do abstracts, and it's so much work. But I'll never ever say that about myself. I'm a guy that does his own research, because every time I hear somebody say that, they don't do any research. When they say they do their own research, what they mean is they've seen one podcast and their opinion on it is
What
completely.
podcast is that?
Definitely not.
So Destiny hates it when people say, I did my own research. I have heard him say countless times, well, I guarantee I've read more on whatever topic than any of them. So he's just saying he does his own research, but it's just better research than anybody else. He's talking out of both sides of his mouth. He's saying, I'd really like to have an honest conversation about this, but the people that want to have a conversation are all idiots. He's basically calling anyone who disagrees with him an idiot, and then says, but we should be able to have conversations about this stuff. Destiny, you are incapable of having a conversation about the weather if someone disagrees with you without screaming and yelling and throwing a hissy fit. And he said he wants more people out of academia to speak out during that time. Did you see what happened to the ones that did speak out? They were cast out and burned at the stake. Why would anyone from academia without an opinion that goes along with the mainstream opinion ever want to speak up? And how great is this? Because this is an older interview, but how great is this? Destiny's telling us how much research he does and how smart he is, but he just said he wants to fight over the lab leak theory. That aged pretty well, huh? And I'm sure there are a lot of people that have not read as much as Destiny on a lot of these topics, but like with the lab leak theory, I'm sure I wasn't as well read as Destiny was when he was doing this interview, but I was relatively confident it came from a lab. I had read some, but I also have eyes, ears, and a brain. If you used Occam's razor, it seemed like the most likely source. And then you'd have idiots like him and other people. If you mentioned anything about it at that time, they'd say, oh, what are you, a doctor? Because you wouldn't get the jab. It's like, no, I'm not a doctor, but I don't need to be to have an opinion on this. And why the hell did Robert Malone on Joe Rogan get him fired up? Why? You want more people to speak up, but then when Robert Malone goes against what you believe, you act like his opinion is invalid. Are you telling me he's not more qualified to comment on it than you? He's always the one who wants evidence, but his entire argument is based on anecdotes. He's just like David Pakman. They only want data, studies, evidence when it's convenient for them or serves their argument. Ugh. Anyway, let's wrap up the video.
Not mine, because it was mine. I wouldn't be criticizing anything they say.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But yeah, so like lab leak is another one where it's like, well, how do you know it's lab leak? How do I know it's lab leak? Because Fauci lied and Hunter Biden laptop, and it's like, okay, come on, you haven't engaged with it at all. There's really interesting research that shows, there's a really strong study that shows that there's like a high degree of certainty that it came from the wet markets. Very, very high degree of certainty. And there was an article that came out recently where it's like, Senate concludes that virus actually came from the Wuhan virology lab or whatever. And that whole article, if you actually read it, it never says that in the article. I don't know why they tweeted it with that headline. But yeah, it's to back up. I'm sorry. I think we should have good.
You should be sorry.
Yeah. I'm not sorry, actually. I get to ramble here, okay? I'm here for a long time. I rescind my apology, okay? I actually rescind my apology. We should be able to have challenging conversations about things, but you gotta, man, be well read on both sides. Not this like, I do my own research, so I don't believe anything that Fauci says. Like, come on, dude. Like, you can do better than that. Not you personally, but
gotcha. How does that feel?
Feels great.
So for people who don't know,
Understood.
That's the catchphrase. Gotcha. Through all tragedy and triumph, through all the roller coaster of life, your response to it is gotcha.
A high degree of certainty that it came from the wet markets, huh? I'll say gotcha to that. I've been watching, unfortunately, a lot of Destiny's debate/interviews recently. From old clips like this to the newest ones, he is so pro-establishment. I'd literally be embarrassed if I ever argued every talking point of the government establishment. Those are the people I want to get rid of in Washington. But we want to hear from you. What do you all think about this conversation between Lex Fridman and Destiny? What did I get wrong? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, as always, really appreciate you watching, and we will see you on the next one.